welcome everyone. Really nice to see all of these familiar faces as well as the new ones here. I'm really excited about this chat. Malte, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we have one question that we start off each fireside chat with. It's a really general question that we have for every of our guests. How did you get into computer science at all?
Oh my goodness. Do I have to say the year and age myself?
No.
No, like I am from a town north of Hamburg, and I got a job when I was 14 years old at a software company, and this was still when they were actually distributing floppy disks. And my job was to label them and print out the manuals and then package it up for the mail. And at some point, that was right around the corner when the very earliest websites were being developed. And while like everyone there was like a math PhD, and at the time they were actually working in Smalltalk, if you've heard of that, and no one knew how to make web pages, so I kind of just picked it up.
Okay, so really early on, and that interest stuck with you. Just giving a brief overview. Malte spent about 11 years at Google, and then his latest role as the CTO of Vercel that most of you probably know. And I want to talk first about your time at Google and kind of what got you there, because going to such a great company, which I guess most of us kind of aspire and have these really big, grand opinions about. What kind of got you there? How did you, fast forward from at 14 years old to your position there, but kind of what led you there, especially also going to the US instead of kind of staying here?
Yeah, so like it's actually a really funny story. So I started at Google in Hamburg, Germany, and as this was in Germany, you start, I think, always on the 1st, which is like a random day of the week, which Americans think is weird. But it was like, so I think it was a Friday, and I had my first ever of my life video conference. So this was like in 2010. And I was very excited. And in this video conference, I was told that they would close the engineering office in Hamburg, Germany. That was later at 4 p.m. on my first day. And then I wasn't like being let go. I was just being given the choice to find a new team. And in hindsight, this was really cool because when first of all, I didn't have any choice at all what to work on in Hamburg. Obviously, they were working exactly on one thing, which was keeping the MySQL database at the time that was running Google AdWords alive. And so now you're on the inside, you understand like what everyone's working on, what's exciting. And so I got to basically pick a team, and then I ended up picking a team that was in Mountain View at the headquarters, and essentially just stuck out the year in Germany to qualify for L1 visa, and then moved over.
Which team was it that you ended up working on?
So that tells you a lot about me being smart. It was the team that would eventually become Google+. But the lucky thing is that because it was so well funded, I was working on front-end infrastructure. And so we just had many people, and it would be able to build really cool things. And so the thing I actually built, kind of my first large project, was a JavaScript framework called Wiz, which now is used by essentially every Google consumer product, and is actually kind of public information that exists as of recently. Google announced in some weird fashion that they're merging it with Angular, but I don't think it's true. And then I built like the micro front-end serving system for all kind of newer Google products. And so we were doing this just for ourselves, but eventually the team that I was on actually still exists. So even though like Google Plus team has been shut down for whatever, 10 years, they turned that into what then would become Google's product infrastructure organization.
So infrastructure and especially front-end has always been thematically very close to what you're doing. What from that point led you to go to Vercel?
Yeah, so I definitely stuck with the infrastructure for a while. What was really interesting that the very last year that I worked at Google, I was still doing, another funny story. The VP at the time, he was being promoted to being the VP for Google Search, and he was my manager. And so he told me, hey, Malte, I need you to rewrite the Google Search front end. And I also need someone to lead the desktop search team. Desktop as in like, whatever you use on your laptop, google.com. And so I was like, cool, that sounds great, let's do it. And then actually, so he was actually being kind of sidelined 3 weeks later, and so the plan to rewrite everything was shelved. But I got to like run the consumer product for a year. That was actually really, I mean, it felt like being like back in like your first year out of college where you know absolutely nothing and everything is new and exciting. And at the same time, Google had just ignored desktop for 7 years. And because of COVID, it became really important, right? Because people were stuck at home and using laptops way more and not so much their phones. And so we had to reinvent how to measure like being successful on laptop, because the metric that the teams were using to launch was based on the assumption that what's on your screen is what you're interested in, which obviously is true on your phone, but it's not true on desktop. So all the metrics, for example, were completely messed up, and we kind of had to do that from scratch. And so I was basically learning how to do these things and also figuring out for the company at the same time, which was cool.
And this experience, or let me phrase it differently, which parts of your experience at Google kind of contributed to you going to Vercel, and maybe also what learnings could you take with you that were essential from your time at Google?
Yeah, good question. So maybe it's actually worth, especially this info in Berlin. So my connection to Vercel actually dates back until 2010. So I used to run a conference called JSConf EU here in Berlin from 2009 to 2019. And in 2010, Guillermo Rausch, who's the CEO now of Vercel, gave a talk there about his JavaScript library called Socket.io. And so that's where I met him. We kind of kept in touch. And then, yeah, obviously, like because my specialty over all these years was in front-end infrastructure, like the relationship to Vercel is quite obvious. And I admire the company. I admire Next.js. Like although I obviously worked on different stuff at Google, I always try to kind of keep some connection to what's actually happening in the real world. And so I thought it was exciting to work at it. As I was, one thing I've said many times is that you leave companies for reasons. Like I was kind of bored. I was working from home in a small room. I didn't yet have a CO2 meter. If I had, I would have known that I was probably poisoning myself. So I joined this new company, and I'm excited about it. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have done the jump. But then I was literally shocked. Like I had forgotten how happy it makes me to work with people who are excited about their work, and that just wasn't the case at Google. Like people it's a generalization, but what I think what's going on is that maybe it's even true for 80%. But you have two kinds of folks. That you have people who can't leave because they are overpaid, right, like me. And then you have people who only go join the company because someone told them that, if you get that job, you can work anywhere, so like stick it out for 2 years, right? And even if that's just 5 or 10%, it kind of takes down the intensity and the excitement so much that it's not great for everyone else. And so I joined the company, I'm like, holy shit, this is great. And it made me remember how I felt like 12 years ago when I joined Google. But as these things move super slowly, you can't actually consciously perceive it until you actually experience something else.
And also you started your position in beginning of 2022, if I'm correct. And your tenure as the CTO of Vercel has really perfectly coincided with the release of ChatGPT, which was in November 2022. How did the subsequent rise of LLMs and AI in general kind of change your approach to the role, and also the shift of, or maybe has it shifted your focus from Vercel's core business? Because LLMs and AI really made a big impact in the space, and how has it changed your approach?
Okay, so many questions here. I think when ChatGPT happened, we went through a process very similar to, I think, many companies. We were asking ourselves, like, yeah, I mean, what does it mean to us, and what should we do, right? And in hindsight, I'm very happy with our reaction, and it's something I really hope most companies kind of achieve eventually. So we were trying to, like, we early on said, okay, we don't want to do random acts of AI. So like just add random shit to your product that's AI based, but no one wants, right? And so instead, we essentially were hoping to do something that feels native to the company and compatible with the brand, and like where it's really something that we should be doing, right? That makes sense in the new context. And so it really culminated in two different products. One is the AI SDK, which I think has become super popular for people who are building AI apps with TypeScript.
Just quickly, who here, first of all, knows the AI SDK and who has used it? Maybe just a show of hands. So I think that already says a lot.
Yeah, by the way, it's made in Berlin. So if you ever want another interview guest.
We actually reached out to Lars.
Yeah, Lars is a very busy person. He takes his job very seriously. It's very hard to maintain a popular open source project. But yeah, so that was one. And we're at heart like a framework company. But on the other hand, like, so with Next.js is like whatever, like an 8th generation web framework. Like when it was designed, it was perfectly well understood what a web app would be. And so you can basically, and how people build them. And so you can really build stuff that like deeply support that process. Whereas still in the AI space, and I think it's even still today, it's true that you don't understand kind of what even an AI app is, and you can't like raise the expectation level to infinity. And so we were seeing there were, like early frameworks like LangChain, which were like very abstract. And again, like that's not the right approach, in my opinion. If something's like, if you don't actually know what you want to do, right, then your abstraction is most likely wrong. And so that's why we built something that's quite low level. Okay, that was just one. The other one, the other product that we built was V0, which actually shipped in the summer of 2023. Or no, sorry, 34. So like 6 months after ChatGPT, where like I think everyone at some point said, okay, holy crap, these great things are great at making text. Can we make it do web pages, right? And I think the answer was basically no, but like we at some point figured out how to do it, and so we built that product, right? And I think again, like, what if not making apps, web apps, as an AI product should be something that Vercel is doing, right? And so again, I think we have these two products that are kind of very native and very compatible with what we should be doing.
Yeah, I do actually remember trying out V0 the first time in summer 24, and it really felt magical at the time. And as you already mentioned, as a frameworks company that made Next.js, hosting Next.js was the obvious product to go down that road. And what do you see as the kind of productization route for the AI SDK? And V0 seems more easy and more, I guess, natural to see as a product, but the AI SDK as a product that you've built is a framework. And how do you think that approach of kind of productizing it fits into Vercel's plan at the moment? Because I already saw it's something relatively new, if I'm not mistaken, that you can actually use AI models through Vercel billing. I think I saw the Grok models being used through Vercel. So kind of taking hosting of this, not framework per se, but taking hosting to this product.
Yeah, so I think the making AI models available through Vercel is that might be a business model, but it's not a very good one. So we actually mostly do that because we want to reduce the friction of using AI. So we have two things. We have a marketplace where you can essentially sign up for Grok and a few other providers through the marketplace. But I think also actually more interesting is that we, and this is super new, it's still in alpha, we shipped an AI gateway, and with that gateway, you get access to essentially every hosted AI model on the market with a free tier. And so we actually mostly do that so that when you, I don't know, if you want to try Gemini or OpenAI or Anthropic or Grok or Vercel or, you know, whatever, like there's so many of them, you don't have to like go there, sign up, give them your email address, get an API key, but we really kind of like are trying to make AI programming accessible to everyone and are, and respectively, you know, reduce the friction. And, you know, we are going to eventually sell that, but we got to make margins in the, like Stripe, right? So unless you build like, buy $10 billion worth of AI from us, it's not going to be, that's a great business. But like, so to answer your question, the answer is actually super easy. So the, I think, and the business model of Next.js is that we're going to make Next.js as large as possible, and some percentage of Next.js applications are going to run on Vercel, and that's what's monetized, right? And so we're really trying to make, you know, we're not trying to host as much of Next.js as possible. We're trying to make Next.js as big as possible and then get some chunk of it. And the similar thing is, so already, you know, if you're building an AI SDK application, you know, it's in TypeScript, there's a high probability actually that you are going to run it on Vercel, but obviously you don't have to. And so for now, it's essentially monetized very indirectly, so through some other app that you happen to be on Vercel. I think what we are looking at, although no one has started writing any code in that direction, is that, like, you can imagine that if there is a more first-class way to make agents in the AI SDK, then you could deploy them by themselves. And maybe that's something where you can essentially deploy an AI SDK application directly to Vercel without wrapping it like another framework. So that will be how we would monetize it. And that's generally our philosophy, that we're not an open core company, right? So these things are truly open source, and you're free to use them wherever you want. But we're trying to then also provide a service that's hopefully really good that people then choose to use.
So with all of these different ideas and possibilities floating around, how do you evaluate which directions are interesting to pursue and which are worth the engineering and the product effort to kind of go into? As you said, AI SDK was developed by Lars Grammel. I think he had what was it called? I think Model Fusion or something. He worked on that before. How do you kind of decide which directions and which opportunities to pursue at a company like Vercel?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the story with Lars is more precisely that we started the AI SDK, and then we found his library, and we were like, there's almost no overlap, but the philosophy was very similar. And so we just approached him and basically asked him, like, don't you want to work on this full time rather than like in your in your evening hours after work? And so that's how we kind of brought him on. And I think at the time for framework development, for almost everything that we do, and which is kind of a privilege when you're a developer company, we usually just look at what we would like and then also use it, and then we sell it. And so that's usually why these things tend to be decently good, because we made them for ourselves, and then so they're really well tried out. But otherwise, I mean, there's many ways to figure out your strategy. Well, we have a very, you could almost call it aggressive demo culture. So we have a zero sign up meeting every Friday for 1 hour, and usually there's like 20 to 30 folks who just want to show off the work that they've done in the week. And then there's almost a running joke, but like what we actually do, and this is like it was such a culture shock for me. So because Google keeps everything secret, you're not allowed to talk to anyone. So what Guillermo does, our CEO, he takes screenshots of the Zoom call and just tweets that shit out. And if people tell him it's great, then it's on the roadmap. And if people are like, what the fuck's going on? then it was basically shut down. And so like people, like basically in the chat, they're like, holy fuck, don't tweet it. And he's like, oh, too late, here you go.
So really developing on the market and on X. So did this kind of motivation and this approach also inspire V0?
Yeah, I think I mean, the way when we were building V0, because I think I mentioned this already, like the idea was kind of obvious, right? Like these things make text, they should be able to make web pages. And then we actually had a small offsite in San Francisco. And so another Vercel engineer from Berlin, his name is Shu. I still remember actually, because I sat in the office with him, like he was there and he was like, raised his arms like, guys, I figured it out. And so like what he did was this was in ChatGPT 3.5, which was really dumb. But he figured out that if you ask it to do Tailwind, it was doing at least decent job. And GPT-4 with Tailwind was actually quite good. And so the insight really was that certainly at the time, the LLMs were better at doing the unified reasoning of HTML and CSS. And then they were at like writing a CSS file and then, half a minute later doing HTML and having half forgotten about it. And so once we, but one interesting thing was then, like from that moment on where we had it kind of working, because we were at the time thinking, okay, we figure out the AI, that's surely the hard part. But then we actually pivoted the UX twice because we just didn't know how to build a product based on this. And we also changed the UX modality already twice again after the initial shipping. And so that was actually really interesting to like see how important the user experience is for AI products, which I think is also a generally interesting insight when it comes to like being just a GPT wrapper, right? Because yeah, V0 is literally, I mean, we just, it's very sophisticated now, but like we just published a blog post about how its AI works. But while there is knowledge and there's a custom trained model, in the middle is essentially an unchanged frontier model. And so it's just a wrapper of that, quote unquote. But like, it's substantially better than prompting Claude or ChatGPT for this, right? Like, so there clearly is a lot of value.
Yeah, I actually want to get into that in a bit. Before though, I want to talk a bit more about the different bets that you at Vercel made in the AI space. AI SDK and V0 are really popular products. Everybody uses them. Most people know of them. Maybe which of the bets and kind of chances you took in the AI and LLM space did not pay off? Which approaches did you try out? Which didn't really quite work the way you expected it to? Or has it been just flawless so far?
That's a good question. I think I think we try to iterate quickly and really quickly find out that something isn't gonna work, and then also
if the Guillermo tweet gets less than 1,000 likes.
Yeah, I mean exactly, right? So like that's the early check. I think what I can give you as an answer is when we first kind of effectively wanted to pivot the company to AI, we tried, I mean, luckily we tried two things at once. We tried having a dedicated team and we tried telling everyone you need to ship AI products. And initially the dedicated team worked and it made the AI SDK and it made V0, and the other part of the equation didn't work. And I think the lesson there is that certainly when technology is early, you do need the depth. You can't just tell everyone like, you still have a day job, but like you also need to ship some AI features. But I also think that in 2025, like, I mean, now is certainly the time where we also understand what the value that AI can add is, and so you can kind of bring it into like a broader product scope.
And as a really engineering-centric company that's building developer tools by developers for developers, I read a blog post of yours that was about shifting the company culture and the engineering culture to evals-driven development. About that, is that something that you developed through these learnings, like rolling or telling all of the employees at your company, just try to ship some AI features, incorporate AI into your development practices? How did that approach develop, and what kind of learnings led to it?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that was actually, in a way, I mean, it was very surprising to me that because I worked on Google Search, I was, I would think through and do evals effectively every day. I mean, I had an executive job, so I would look at other people's evals, but that was like the core thing of the team, right? Just to get an idea. So these evals were done by humans, and the money it cost was roughly in the same order of magnitude as the machine cost. So like the effort was insane. But then obviously, like I had worked on frameworks before where you wouldn't do that. I go to Vercel, no one's doing any evals, and so I had like these like deja vus as like that kind of came back. But so luckily, at least I had some experience, and we initially like hand rolled a few solutions, like basically did side by side for V0 in particular, and then eventually started using a product called BrainTrust. And so, I mean, I would, we're certainly still in the learning phase how to do this well, but we gotten pretty good. We have actually the blog post I just mentioned that introduces our model architecture has one eval in it. When that eval is almost like a unit test. So the eval is essentially, I'm going to do this generation task, and you're generating code, and the code is a Next.js app, and the eval is that it compiles with TypeScript TC, and when you run it, it has no errors, right? So that's an objective measure. Now, does it tell you whether your application looks good? No, it might actually be empty technically, or like the smallest possible, hopefully not. But it is a good start, and it's something we do hill climb, right? Where so on that same eval, Claude Sonnet 4 score is a 64. So which also means, or like something in the 60s. So like basically 100 minus 60 is how the percentage that the apps that it generates just plain like objectively don't work. And so we kind of hill climb that up to 93%, which is like pretty meaningful. And so that's really, really nice thing to be able to do. But obviously, like it doesn't capture the entirety of the capabilities. So we're certainly still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, so let's get into it. I thought your blog post on the V0, I think you call it composite model architecture. I thought it was really, really interesting. Maybe for those, because it just happened, I think, a few days ago or something, or weeks ago. For everyone that's not familiar, could you maybe quickly break down what you shipped and how it's kind of impacting and enabling all of the people here?
Yeah, so from the outside, what we shipped is the model that is underlying V0 as an AI model that you can use yourself. It's using the OpenAI API, so that whenever you have a place that can consume the OpenAI API, you can use this model. The most widely applicable one is that you put it into Cursor. So in Cursor, you can go into Cursor settings, model, and then there's the OpenAI section, and you basically just paste our API address, and you paste our API key, and then you can use V0's API directly in Cursor. And as I was mentioning, it has substantially higher evals on web dev tasks than the base model. So I think it's an interesting choice.
And it's basically a out-of-the-box V0 that you can just call via API with, I saw in the blog post, retrieval augmented generation, RAG, for a lot of up-to-date documentation and up-to-date of the frameworks and dependencies, but also using the state-of-the-art code gen models in combination with a custom model that you developed, which is for bug fixing, if I'm not mistaken. And how did you kind of come up with this approach? Was it just by iterating on V0 and trying to kind of get the best out of the product and having this V0 API as a, let's say, byproduct of it? Or was that something that you developed purposefully and were working on simultaneously?
I mean, because it's literally the same model as what the product uses, like we were primarily trying to make the product better, right? And eventually decided that we would ship an API as well. Like, so I already mentioned the cursor use case. The other use case is basically that we see a lot of demand for companies who want to build like specialized V0s, just like just like you have a ChatGPT wrapper. Maybe you work at, we're in the Contentful building, right? So if you're a Contentful, maybe you want to have a tool that allows people to build like the head for your headless CMS with a prompt, but specialize in knowing the Contentful APIs, right? So similarly, there's other other CMS providers or like shop system. Anyone who like has like a need for building web applications might be interested in using the model, right? So that's why we made the strategic decision to make it available. And we are fans of kind of commoditizing ourselves. So we'll see who knows what we will do. So that's the reason why we did it. And then, yeah, but otherwise we just wanted to make V0 as good as possible. And I think the reason why the composite architecture, I think, is really powerful is that it almost certainly makes no sense to train your own frontier model. Even if you could, right, you need to commit to essentially entering a treadmill where the day you're done, you have to go and make the next one, right? Because 2 weeks later, like one of your competitors is going to ship another model, and so you need to start making the next one, right? And so even if, let's say, you have $100 million to spend, you need to almost treat it like OpEx, where you have the next $100 million, right? And so like that seems not like a great move. And so we definitely decided that we would have to use a frontier model in the generation step. But then also we realized that the frontier models actually weren't doing a good job. And the question was basically how do we fix it? And I think the main thing that so if you're using Cursor, for example, you're experiencing this problem, and the way traditionally tools handle this is basically Cursor will like run the thing, then it will actually figure out that there's something wrong, then it will go ahead and evoke the LLM again to fix it, right? And so that works, but it's quite a slow process, right? And so what we wanted to do is like when the LLM emits like const a equals 1, and then the next line it emits a equals 2, that's clearly a syntax error that you can notice in that moment, and you can fix it by changing the const to a let, right? You don't have to wait for the rest of the file or even like the rest of the next 10 files to come back to figure out that this is not going to work. And so we invested all this time to do the fixing in a streaming fashion. So ideally, by the time that the model is done with the entirety of the work, the program's already in good shape. And so that's what we've invested in, and then basically we just at some point decided to wrap it in what can be consumed as a model.
And this also enables you to kind of swap out the big frontier model at any given time to change it, whatever model is beating the benchmarks.
Exactly, yeah, and it's not a theoretical thing, right? So we use, so today there's a model switcher, right? And you can use version 1.0 of our model, which is Sonnet 3.7. You can use 1.5, which is MD, and those are like tailwind sizes. So the mid model is Sonnet 4, and the large model, actually we started out with Sonnet 4 Opus, but it wasn't good. And then we switched it to Gemini 2.5 Pro. And that's like good validation that the architecture actually works and you have that flexibility.
And this kind of, I guess, trickles down to a lot of implications on the V0 product, and also to the end experience of the user. So one question that I have about this is, how do you evaluate the experience of the API user versus the V0 user if they are essentially using the same model? Do you just expect them to always kind of conform to the V0 use case when using your model? Or is that something that you also consider having different use cases be used with that model? And how do you kind of look at that?
Yeah, I think certainly the promise of our model is that it's good at tasks that aren't the same as, I mean, the reason why it's cool to use it in Cursor is that Cursor is a more flexible tool. But also, like, obviously only if you're an engineer who would even know how to do that, right? But so it's not the same use case almost by definition as V0, but it, like, obviously you're working on, like, you know, the model is like specialized in Next.js and web dev and Tailwind and ChatCN. Like, it's like, if you're on that stack, then the model will do a really good job. We effectively, what we do have are, we have a few kind of evals that effectively just try to make sure that we don't completely overfit the model for its use case. So let's say if you because it's, you know, effectively repping Sonnet 4, like if you ask it to, like, I don't know, write the US Constitution in a haiku, then it's going to do roughly as well as Sonnet 4, right? Because that's effectively like what's going on. And so we're trying to, like, just write emails that we don't regress that. But, you know, it's not 100% guaranteed that it won't, I don't know, put a mention of Next.js in there somewhere. So I wouldn't recommend using it for that use case.
All right. Lastly, I want to talk about the opening of your new Berlin office. Kind of what made that happen? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's your second office in Europe after London. And what decision did you make, or how did this come to fruition, having an office in Berlin as opposed to other possible locations? I mean, I'm of course glad to see the Berlin community evolving and thriving, but kind of what was the process behind that?
Yeah, I think it really and I think it's actually true for many companies, like Vercel kind of technically had an office a long time ago when the company had like 10 employees, but then it grew extremely, like, it grew from small to like mid-size-ish during the pandemic. And so respectively, we hired people wherever they were. And, you know, like we now have an office in San Francisco, but we actually only moved in, I think, March last year. And before that, we were like in a WeWork. So it's still, like, it's new for the company to even have offices. And we actually, I think in New York, we had a place earlier. But yeah, no, really what we found was that A, it's nice working in offices. B, people want to work in offices. Not everyone, but like there's definitely people who do. And this is especially true in large cities. Like in New York City, no one wants to work from home because everyone lives in a tiny studio, right? So there you just have to have a place. You know, and I think most cities are somewhat in between. And then we basically just looked, like, given that we hired people in random places, in fact, it's not random. Like, people, like, it's really like this follows the biases of the places where software engineers live, right? So and I think we, like, almost strictly follow that, right? Like, so, I mean, and Vercel has, like, while we do hire all over the world, we have been trying to bias our hiring to essentially the United States, Germany, UK, Netherlands, and now Canada, I think. So, for complicated reasons, but that we don't have to get into. But so that's why we had about, like, lots of engineering in Germany. And so some good set of them just happens to live in Berlin. And so we were, like, just looking at the map saying, like, where do most of our people live? Oh, it's Berlin. Okay, let's have an office there.
I mean, sounds great for the multiple Vercel employees. And just generally about the comparison of the US and Europe, how do you, or do you even evaluate that when looking at candidates, but also products and the overall tech scene? Because that's something that we are, of course, concerned with here. We try to build the Berlin community, and of course, SF as the global tech epicenter is unbeatable in that sense. but how do you look at the difference between the US and maybe Europe, but also Berlin and Germany?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you look at any given person, it's not that different. We try to organize our teams by time zone, essentially. And so there's certain kind of things we happen to do in Europe and certain things we happen to do in the United States. I think there's like, I don't know, like these places have different levels of availability of engineering talent. But in a way, that's almost it. Like I don't see big difference besides that. So that's true for talent, right? Like I think it is absolutely a thing that like there's an event like this in San Francisco, probably like 3 per day, right? But that's also like, I mean, that's in a way, I mean, it's not that that was probably also the case in the past, right? Like, but that follows hype cycles in a pretty extreme fashion. And you know, I mean, I said like it's random that we're in Berlin, but I'm also very happy, right? Well, I never lived here. I love the city. I like coming here. So I am very happy that Berlin won out over Munich.
Yeah. As a Berlin person, I can also confirm that. Nice. So thank you so much. We're going to move on to Q&A now. So get your questions ready. Also.
Hello. In the beginning, how did you get hiring or like getting teams working across different countries? Like, did you just decide to hire in groups, or like, I don't know how it worked in the beginning, if it's just one country or across the world?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined Vercel, which is like 3 years and 4 months ago, I think we had 80 engineers, and we had just hired the first 3 engineering managers. And so like they were basically still onboarding. Like they were before me, but like they were still onboarding. And so there was effectively no organization at all. Like it was basically like a beehive where like someone running in one direction and everyone's, you know, some people follow them and some people don't. So that's kind of where this comes from. And then we were like at some point we were, you know, thinking about how the organization should be built. And coming from Google, I was like used to having like a reorg every 6 months or so. But I was like, okay, this isn't actually, it's not a reorg, it's like our organization, where we're like, for the first time, we're like kind of bringing some structure into the company. And then we basically try to find cohesive teams that are the same time zone. But there was never, like, it's still difficult, like we're too distributed to have teams that are constrained to one location. And so that's just not even in our SF alpha, it's not a practical matter. And so yeah, we just try to do time zone based matching.
Hi, I'm Priyanka. Very nice to have you here. My question is related to V0. You mentioned that you changed the UX of V0 3 times. What is your way to measure, because this is a non-deterministic case, it's not a simple analytics tool which could work like post hoc in this case. So what is your basis of deciding this change that you brought and how you're measuring it? Do you have some internal tool that you built, or you like using some third-party analytics tools for this?
Yeah, really good question. I think it's this is actually something I had to learn kind of coming from Google, because I thought you run experiments. And there are actually 2 companies that are good in that way. So there's Statsig and Growthbook, who do they're both folks from Meta, who were essentially bringing the tools that they used in their career there into the broader market. And we do use these, but the thing I had to learn is that in the developer space, your user base is too small to effectively run experiments like this for anything but kind of the absolute top of the funnel, right? That works, but you can't really run an experiment on a SaaS product, especially if you, for example, want to break it down only to your paid users. There just isn't, there aren't enough of them. That data is going to be effectively worthless. So having said that, on V0, we very, very closely track the in-product feedback. Every single time you press downvote or upvote or give any type of feedback, like it goes into the Slack channel, which is like religiously read, and we try to kind of get conclusions from there. Another thing, and that's I think that probably generalizes to many AI products. There is strong willingness to pay, but also because people pay, they get really mad if it doesn't work. And so V0 is very, very sensitive to quality changes, both in terms of growth trajectory and churn trajectory. And so for better or worse, you actually know really quickly if you mess something up. But then, at the end, like because you were asking about the big UX changes, that was mostly done with conviction and not so much trying to like A/B test between two versions. I don't really believe in that, to be honest.
Hi, Andreas here. Thanks for doing this. Vercel is quite known for good DX. And now that more and more code is done by agents, by CodeGen, by Cursor and Co. Do you have like similar mental models for like agent DX, or like how to make sure that these kind of things prefer Vercel?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely important to think about in this space how agent users are different from humans and optimize for them. And I'll give one example. When you trigger first of all, the agents love our CLI. The agents in general love CLIs in a way that I think humans don't necessarily do. And with the Vercel CLI right now, if you trigger a build, what it really does, it says, thank you, here's a URL where you can follow the progress. And that's it, right? That program terminates and just says, go to this URL to figure out what's going on, which makes a lot of sense because eventually also we'll give you another URL because really what you wanted to go was go to like the preview deployment, right? But if let's say your Devon or your Claude Code or Codex, you want to know, first of all, did the build succeed? And if no, you want to know why, right? And so our current CLI doesn't give you the answer, at least not trivially. And so we really have to fix that, right? So there are definitely changes like that to DX where the agents are key. And another thing is that, like, I mean, one of the things that V0 model helps with is because we get to update the knowledge. It's better at understanding certain forms of API changes, but since you obviously can't rely on everyone using this model, not even close, I think we for better or worse have to be very, very, very careful with certain type of API changes, because you just cannot get the model to understand that they have to behave differently, and so that's definitely kind of constraining what we can do these days.
Hi, I'm Eckhart. Hello, Malte. So we are a small team running our AI solution for doctors on Vercel. And while we were still two guys in the garage, we just cobbled it together and threw it on there because it was easy and cheap. And now we are slowly becoming a real company and deploying it to real clinics. Now we are always faced with a question, so where do you host your stuff? Where's the database? All of those things. Are you compliant with ABC? And so let's say maybe a year ago, we would have thought that Vercel might be, the partner of choice to stay on Vercel, especially in the enterprise plan. You offer certain things for guaranteeing the compliance. But now with the proclivity of the US government to enforce whatever they want, we are more and more faced with the discussion whether an American company is a safe place at all. So obviously that extends to AWS and Azure and Google, but there the argument is they're big enough to have an army of lawyers to at least make it more difficult. So what's your, I don't know, what's your counterpoint to that?
No, I think that, I mean, this is a good good question, right? Like we do have a lot of like kind of folks from the medical industry on Vercel. There, as far as I know, there isn't as straightforward of a certification in Germany as there is in the United States with HIPAA. But the kind of that regulation like is relatively kind of not straightforward, but like it's common sense. And so it's, I think, a good idea to kind of follow the same constraints as to what you should do. And in that case, for example, you shouldn't put your database on the internet. If you don't want to do that on Vercel, you have to buy a secure compute product, which then allow you to VPC peer to your database and do stuff like that. So that's just a technical answer. I think Vercel has, we don't have an army of lawyers, but we do have, and this certainly wasn't the case 3 years ago, we do have a legal department. And we would, I think, fight tooth and nail. There hasn't been anything like that in the United States. We actually do have interesting run-ins with governments around the world on somewhat regular basis that has a legal department involved. The most recent one, speaking of arbitrary government action, has been in Spain. And it actually isn't necessarily the government that's being arbitrary and capricious. It's the court system. So the Spanish legal liga has won a court ruling that allows them to effectively at will block IP addresses at the ISP level in Spain. And we, like essentially every other CDNs on the planet, use a somewhat small number of IP addresses that with any cast to serve the content that we do. And so someone finds some website that does soccer or football streaming, then they go to the court, and even though they could technically do SNI blocking, they just nuke all of Vercel off the internet, which we don't love. And so we were trying to work with them, but yeah, so we were, it's a interesting legal situation there. So yeah, I think as you say, it's a broader question, right? Like it does indeed extend in our case to AWS, which is our primary cloud platform. And what they do, so I think this is actually, so AWS currently is building a dedicated cloud for Europe that is where you literally cannot use the same AWS account, right? So it's completely separate system, but still, like, it's very hard for them to not have any ties to this company, even though it's a European entity that owns everything. So I think it's effectively an unanswerable problem, but like, I think it's there is a lot of I think there's reason to be optimistic that it won't come to the worst outcome in this case, because I think this army of lawyers from 3 of the top 5 companies in the United States is effectively, at least on our side and all of your sides. So I think it's quite likely that we'll come out with a situation that will be reasonable in the end.
Evening, I'm Puneet. Thanks a lot for your insights so far. One area where I deeply resonated with you was how you described going from a mature organization where there are set processes and rules to a scale-up like Vercel. I went through a similar situation and found that while there are the degrees of freedom that you mentioned, which empower you, there's also a vacuum that you feel in terms of things that are missing. And what were the skills that you had that helped you succeed in that environment, and what did you have to develop from scratch to succeed?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if I think about it in such a first class way, right? Like I already mentioned how it felt like a beehive, and there was this situation literally on the second day where there was a team in Europe, which is the team that owns our compute products, and there's a team in the United States that owns our serving system. But at the time, because we only had 3 managers, they actually had the same manager. So they were they had a basically region-based identity, but they were technically the same team. And it was clear that they were like, wasn't like they had to work together on something and they weren't. And so I was like, maybe I should have a meeting and invite them all. And so like we had a meeting and they worked it out. It was not a problem at all, right? And so the afterwards I got like Slack messages. Oh my God, Malte, you're so good at this. Holy shit, no one thought about having a meeting. And I was like, this is the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. Because I like if you come from a big company and two teams don't talk to each other, there's usually some like deeper reason, right? Or like where like it's like some turf fight, like they want on each other's ground, they hate each other, like they don't talk to each other anymore. And here it was just like literally this company being so immature and so like not understanding how to work with dozens of engineers rather than like a dozen engineer, right? That like yeah, it was just easy to fix. At the same time, like I mean, I don't know. Maybe there was a skill like at Google. You're good. The way you have a career is that you heed the advice that you never ask for permission. You just ask for forgiveness, right? So you just run as fast as you can. You ignore all the rules, and you're smart about it so that you don't get fired. That's how you're successful. And I think if that's kind of the rules that you live by, then it also works at a scale up.
From your career at Vercel, do you remember a moment where you were like only at Vercel? This could ever happen? Like,
yes. Let me see if I can think of a concrete examples. But what I really, I'm always just incredibly impressed by the hackathons that we do, and by kind of the outcomes that people produce in a very short amount of time. I don't have a concrete example, but I think it happens all the time. Like I'm kind of shocked by especially what someone had done without anyone else knowing about it, and then just kind of shows up and says, I have this new product, and then you're kind of, oh my God, we have to change everything about how we think about the world and adopt our strategy to whatever you just did.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So you have worked at Google for a while, so I think you maybe thought a bit about search, having worked at Google Search. And I was just wondering, what do you think about Google Search today? Because even the people I know at Google, they say it's like Goodhart's law in action, where everything is like failing a bit. And kind of connected to this question, how do you personally, if you look up some new information, do you search it on Google, or do you maybe, for example, I use a paid search service. I don't want to make an ad because I invested in them, but I use paid search, you use ChatGPT, or what's your, like, how do you find information, and how you as a CTO would, if you don't like how Google has evolved, how would you prevent that as a CTO?
I'm not sure I understood the last question there. What is it? What's
the first question is, how do you like
yeah,
Google?
I got the first question.
Yeah, but then if the answer is you don't like Google, how would you prevent that as a CTO at Vercel? If you like Google, how would you like do it the same way, I guess? So what do you see as your responsibility as a CTO to kind of steer the company as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're not Google, so I think we're not directly impacted by this. But I think the dynamic that's really important is, I think what lots of folks don't understand about Google's business model is that the vast majority of queries that all of you do every day only lose the company money, right? Because there's no ads, they're not monetized, and but they help building a habit that you keep using the product and you use it for the monetized queries, right? And so it's October and you understand you need new car insurance. So you go to Google and you search for car insurance, and then you click and Google gets $50, right? Or you're looking to buy a new car, or you're looking to buy anything, go on vacation, right? It's in your muscle memory. Okay, Google did a good job teaching me about playing guitar. They might also be great at booking my holiday to Thailand, right? So I'm gonna go to Google, and I click the Google Flights link, and they make some money, right? So it's very, very important for them to build that habit. And what's going on now is that LLMs, they're particularly good at knowledge queries, and the knowledge queries are the ones that Google makes no money on, right? And so that's why what you see today is that while, I mean, certainly in my habit, you have these knowledge queries shifting to LLMs, that has no impact on Google's revenue because people still go to them for the stuff that's actually monetized. So good for them. But obviously, like over time, the habits change, and I think eventually you'll have the LLMs all be really good at commercial queries as well, even though right now they're pretty bad. But that's going to change, and so I think there's a real threat for Google as a company to lose a bunch of traffic. I think it's almost inevitable. And I don't think they have done a good job on Gemini. I think they're doing better on the AI mode right now. It's fine. It's not too bad. So yeah, I think that's the situation. I still don't quite understand what you were asking about, how this applies to Vercel. I think what we are seeing is because I think the engineers are early adopters of AI. We are seeing substantial traffic coming to Vercel.com from ChatGPT in particular. This traffic is very, no one clicks through because they want to answer some question about that it's on our docs. And we're very happy, why would we want anyone to know our docs? It's great if ChatGPT can answer the question. But the people who then eventually they okay, I want to deploy my Next.js app, and ChatGPT says, great, you can go to Vercel.com. So what we see is we see a lot of traffic, and this traffic converts extraordinarily well. So I think as a business, we're really, really happy with this development. And I think it's an interesting question, how do you influence AI systems in a way that maybe in the past you would have tried to do SEO, but that's certainly something that's still emerging, how that works.
Okay, last question.
Hi, good evening. I'm curious to understand, how do you think about the future of V0 in terms of the competition? Because we can see the model companies moving into coding, and the vibe coding companies moving into models like you or Windsurf. And on the point of Windsurf, we can see the issues of dependency with them being cut off by Anthropic from cloud access. I'm just curious how you think about this whole development in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that this is such a competitive space, and everyone's kind of challenging each other and outdoing each other and really pushing the state of the art. So I think it's just as a person right in the middle, I'm really enjoying it, and we'll see who comes out ahead. I have zero doubt. Even if we end up losing out, and I think I have high confidence in us being able to go to build good DX and to do it better than certainly any of the model companies, right? They invest in coding because it's working, but it's not in their heart, right? At their heart, they're research labs that want to get usage on their stuff because that gets them more data. But I think I have zero doubt that they will move on to something else once the models are actually good at this else, and then we continue to be focused on the technology ourselves.